Hello, and welcome to Defense Capital. My name is NC Bipindra. I'm the editor of Defense Capital here, and we are going to be doing a show today, which will be dealing with and discussing India's defense sector and the related developments in the recent past. Today, we are going to be discussing the commissioning of INS Arighaat, which is a nuclear-powered nuclear-armed ballistic missile-carrying submarine. This has been commissioned just yesterday, which is August 29th, 2024, in the presence of India's Defense Minister, Mr. Arighaat Singh. And this has happened in Visakhapatnam, and which is the main submarine base of India, where we do the submarine construction, particularly the nuclear submarine construction. In this episode of Defense Capital Show, we will be trying to find out what this INS Arighaat commissioning means to India's security, and also the military-related geopolitics that is happening in Indo-Pacific region, with specific regard to this nuclear submarine aspect. And also we'll be discussing India's nuclear triad and what it means to the nuclear triad, apart from the capabilities of the Indian industry to manufacture nuclear-armed and nuclear-powered submarines. So these are some of the aspects that we'll be covering. To discuss this very interesting topic, we have with us a veteran Indian submariner, Commodore Anil Jai Singh. Sir, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Bipindra. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Just to let the audience know about Commodore Anil Jai Singh, he's a very senior Indian Navy officer who retired a while ago, but he has had a wide range of experience in his career, over 30-year career in the Indian Navy. Commodore Anil Jai Singh is also an adjunct fellow at the National Maritime Foundation, which is a think tank that is run by the Indian Navy. And he's also the vice president of the Navy Foundation Delhi chapter here in Delhi. So he has a wide-ranging experience. That apart, he's a former co-chair for Defense and Aerospace Committee of ASSOCHAM, which is an industry body in India. And he has a wide range of industry experience. He has worked with several submarine manufacturers, both Indian and global companies. That is precisely why we called him here, invited him here to speak with us today on the subject. He's also a specialist in anti-submarine warfare, and he has been trained in the Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union. And he was also the commissioning officer of 2 kilo-class submarines that India operates at this point in time. He has served in the Navy headquarters in the Directorate of Plans, which is a very important position, which kind of deals with submarine building plans and shipbuilding plans and stuff like that, and also the force levels of the Indian Navy. So he was also dealing with submarine acquisition, and he has been the officer who commanded 5 Indian naval vessels, naval platforms, including 4 submarines and 1 fleet ship, which were all operational for a long while. So, and he was also part of a 30-year submarine building plan of the Indian Navy. So he has wide-ranging experience. So it's a pleasure to have you, sir. It's an honor to be introducing you today on the show.
No, thank you for your very kind words. And as I said, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Right, sir. So let's just jump into the issue, sir. Let's talk about this topic, INS Arighaat commissioning. What does it really signify for India's national security and also India's naval power in the sense that it's a very important component of the force levels of India, and also what does it mean to the Indian security capability as such?
See, SSBNs or nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, which are called SSBNs, and that's what I'll refer to them as subsequently, are the ultimate strategic weapon platform that a navy can have or a country can have. Because they operate from the depths of the oceans, as far away from your shores as you want, and so they have the element of surprise, stealth, and concealment in your strategic capability, in a country's strategic capability. And it is not a capability that everybody can either develop or afford. And that is why it is restricted only to the five permanent members of the UN Security Council, US, Russia, China, the UK and France. And India is only the sixth country in the world which has SSBNs, which has built its own SSBNs. So from a strategic perspective, the addition of Arighaat, you would recollect that INS Arighaat, the first Indian-built SSBN, was commissioned 7-8 years ago. And that was meant to be not only a very potent ballistic missile platform, but also a sort of technology demonstrator to show to the world that we could do it on our own. Arighaat is coming as a second SSBN, adds a lot of strategic heft to India in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly since we have two adversarial nuclear-armed neighbors in the north and in the west. It does, a second SSBN shifts the strategic balance, if I may use the word, in our favor in many ways. So it's not just another platform. It's a strategic ballistic missile submarine platform that has been added to the Indian Navy's arsenal, or the country's arsenal, because strategic is more country-related than service-related. So I think from that perspective, the addition of Arighaat is going to be something that the world is going to look at very keenly. Our neighbors who have any inimical intentions towards us are going to look at it very keenly. It reinforces our stand as a no first use power, which I will come to subsequently, because our second strike capability becomes increasingly credible with the second SSBN. And from an Indian perspective, it showcases India's technological skills, India's industrial skills, the good coordination between the atomic energy establishment, Indian industry, the R&D establishment, the Indian Navy, and all stakeholders, private industry, and all stakeholders who have been involved in developing this capability for the country. Because SSBN capability is not something anybody shares with anybody else. It has never been done before, and I don't think it's ever going to be done again. SSNs, perhaps, AUKUS might lead to that, but definitely not SSBNs. Even the US and UK, who work very closely together in the strategic arena, US has never shared SSBN technology with the UK. So it's a very unique capability that we have got. We've had to work very hard for it. It's taken time, but we have achieved it. And I mean, saying achieved it is not really accurate. We achieved it a few years ago with Arighaat. But the very fact that we can do it with the second boat and then probably, keep improving our capability, keep adding value and in terms of the capability is a major achievement for India.
Right, sir. So the news reports that have come out, particularly the statement that was issued by the Ministry of Defense as soon as the commissioning happened in Visakhapatnam, talked about advanced technology that it's much advanced than INS Arighaat. So what do you think is the difference in the capability between, of course, I mean, it's a very secretive project, as we all know, and of course, INS Arighaat itself was commissioned in a very secretive way, and journalists like us, we brought it out in our reports in February 2016 when it was commissioned. So I remember I was with Bloomberg at the time and I had broken the story of the commissioning. So such a secretive project, but fortunately, we find that the Ministry of Defense is openly coming out and talking about it today and publishing it in a press release. So why do you think this change happened? Because you did mention that the capability is something that nobody else is going to give you, and it also showcases, India's technological advancement that we have done. But apart from that, how significant is this coming out and openly talking about it?
No, I think it's very significant for two reasons. Firstly, I think we now make no bones about the fact that we are a nuclear weapon power. We are a powerful country. And I think it's important. The world must know what our capabilities are, particularly when you reach this level of power. You have to showcase that. There's no point hiding it and saying, I don't have it and all. We must showcase it. We have to adopt a strategic posture. We have to let people know what our capabilities are. So I think from that perspective, perhaps that's the reason that we've not been very coy about commissioning Arighaat. As you're right, we were about commissioning Arighaat. Though, of course, if you remember, Mrs. Manmohan Singh had launched Arighaat in 2009. So even that was not so secret that we were not doing it. But I think it's time to come out and say, yes, we have this capability and the world must know what we have. I think that's important. Every other country does talk about its SSBN capability. When they start a new program, it's in the media, it's everywhere, including the Chinese. So there's no reason for us to hide it. That's number one. Secondly, it's a message that, look, we are now very much there and this is our new posture. and we are going to tell you we have it so that you take heed of it. I think that is an important part of it as well.
So
That is
it's
the message
essentially,
also.
yeah, it's essentially a messaging that we are sending across both to our two arch rivals in the
Yes.
west and the north, and also
Yeah.
to the world powers around
World
the
in general, yeah.
world in general and Indo-Pacific in particular. So
And
that's
that because it brings a certain this capability brings a certain amount of prestige with it for a country.
absolutely,
That's
and
important.
also
Yeah.
sends across a stringent message
It does.
to the inimical forces around the country.
It does.
We have.
As
Sir,
far as the advancements go, I'm sure, since so many years have passed between Arighaat and Arighaat, firstly, we must have learned a lot of very important lessons from Arighaat. That was the first time we were ever operating. We had built our first submarine. We were trying to operate it for the first time. So there must have been some valuable lessons to learn on operations, on, certain areas which needed attention. So I'm sure Arighaat has gone through that entire phase of addressing all those lessons learned. And Arighaat will be a much better boat on commissioning than Arighaat probably was. Arighaat must have still had some teething troubles. So I think from that perspective, it's important. Arighaat has been undergoing sea trials for the last few years. We've been hearing about Arighaat sea trials for the last few years.
Yes.
And that is not because, there would have been any problems with the submarine. I think the point was that before Arighaat is commissioned, she should be absolutely 100% combat capable in every respect, deterrent capable in every respect. And so the trial must have continued till such time we were confident that we have achieved that level of readiness and availability of the submarine. As far as advancements go, well, it's a continuum of technology. Technology is a continuum which is going to keep sort of getting applied to every platform that the Navy commissions. So I'm sure, I also don't know what there is or not on it because, as you said, it's very secret. But as a submariner, I would think that they would have improved the stealth capabilities of the submarine. They would have improved the weapon payload of the submarine. We know that these submarines have been carry the K-15 missile, which is a range of 750 kilometers. But we also have a K-4 missile, which is on the threshold of being accepted within the service, which has a range of 3,500 kilometers. So perhaps this submarine is better equipped to handle a longer range missile than Arighaat. I'm not sure. I'm sure there would be an improvement in the fire control system and the platform management system on board. So there would be incremental improvements in the submarine based on just sheer technology having advanced by that much in so many years. And the research and development establishment, the atomic energy establishment, continuously working towards incorporating new technologies. We probably have a much better submarine in Arighaat than we have in Arighaat in terms of its more contemporary capability at the moment.
Yeah, so this for the audience's sake, this particular INS Arighaat will be having 12 launch tubes which can fire the K-15 700 kilometer range missile, and also 4 launch tubes which can fire the K-4 missile, which is the 3,000 plus kilometer range missile. So that's a of course, INS Arighaat itself had tested this K-15 in February 2022 successfully. Yes. So it's basically an operational submarine, fully ops, as they call it in the military parlance, which means that it is fully capable of doing all its operations.
If you recollect, in 2018, Arighaat was sent for a deterrent patrol.
Correct, yes.
Which was a very successful patrol, and after that, the Prime Minister felicitated the crew. They came to Delhi, they met the Prime Minister. So, and that was another message, because the Prime Minister said that evening that this successful deterrent patrol has now proved to the world that we are no more susceptible to any nuclear blackmail by anybody, because we have this capability ourselves. That was a very telling statement to highlight India's capability. And I think that deterrent patrol was not so much about being able to deliver a weapon. A submarine can fire a weapon. All submarines fire weapons, torpedoes and missiles. It was about putting the entire ecosystem of the command and control architecture required for a ballistic missile submarine to launch its missile on orders from a central command authority, which is probably sitting in New Delhi at a particular time on specific coordinates, and being able to effect the intention or the retaliation that the political leadership wants. So that is a very tricky thing, because after all, the submarine is hundreds of miles away at sea, it's hundreds of meters below the depth, and to be able to do it with that accuracy, because don't forget, a nuclear ballistic missile cannot be reversed. You can't change your mind and say, okay, sorry, you don't fire it, because beyond a point, it reaches the point of no return.
Yeah.
So firstly, the command authority has to be very clear that it has to be launched. And once that order is given to the commanding officer, you can't be indecisive about whether you want it to happen or not. And he has to make sure that that weapon goes where it's meant to go, on the coordinates and hit whatever target it's supposed to hit. So that's a very complex ecosystem. It could also happen that your own command authority may be under attack. We may have had a preemptive first strike from somebody. So still to be able to effect a second strike, I think that ecosystem, that sort of command and control network is what a deterrent patrol proves, more than the fact that the submarine can deliver a weapon. That, of course, is the submarine's job to deliver a weapon. So perhaps that has been refined over the years with Arighaat, and Arighaat is that much better networked to be able to carry out this role.
Right, sir. What the Commodore is referring to is the chain of command that exists as far as our nuclear deterrence is concerned. So as we all maybe have read, that the Indian Navy will be operating this platform, this nuclear armed platform at sea. But the command is under the Strategic Forces Command, which is a tri-service formation of the Indian Armed Forces. But essentially, the ultimate decision-making lies with the civilian power, which is the National Nuclear Command Authority, which is headed by the Prime Minister of India. This is just for the viewers' benefit, yes, so that they carry some basic general knowledge on the nuclear deterrence capability. And this actually brings me to the very interesting next question that we have. In fact, I was one of the fortunate journalists who could watch the launch of INS Arighaat in July 2009. Sir, I was one of those people who had was fortunate enough to be very near and also take a picture along with INS Arighaat. So I'm pretty proud of that moment, actually. In fact, I'm recalling that moment when we are speaking about it. So essentially, I'm going to be asking you about the nuclear triad. So this INS Arighaat and INS Arighaat both have the capability to launch a submarine-launched, to operate or fire a submarine-launched ballistic missile. So it actually completes the nuclear triad, which, I mean, of course, we have already completed the nuclear triad when Arighaat did the test in February 2022. But the point is, what is the significance of a submarine-launched ballistic missile capability? Why do we say the nuclear triad has been complete? Because we do have the Agni series, which are launched from land, and also the air-based Sukhoi and the Mirage capabilities that we have for firing nuclear missiles on board an aircraft, combat aircraft. But what is the significance of this SLBMs?
So as you mentioned, the nuclear triad means a credible land-based delivery capability, an air-based delivery capability, and a sea-based delivery capability of a ballistic missile launch. The importance of the triad, particularly in our context, is that firstly, no first use is a cornerstone of our nuclear doctrine, which means that under no provocation or maybe under normal conditions, we will never launch a nuclear attack on another country, which means that you are telling another country that, I'm not going to be the first one to attack you. So if there's an inimical nation which is intending to go nuclear, their first attempt will be to take out your land facilities and your air facilities, because they have some idea, they being on land, satellite surveillance, etc., they would have an idea of where it's based. That we may do it very smartly and not allow it to happen is different. But the fact is, they will attempt it. And they could succeed to a certain extent. They may not succeed 100%. But they have no idea where the sea-based deterrent missile is going to come from. That submarine is out at sea somewhere, hundreds of miles away from shore, hundreds of meters, thousands of miles away from shore, hundreds of meters below the depths. So they have absolutely no idea that when that retaliatory strike comes, in case they carry out a preemptive first strike, where it's going to come from and what kind of lethality it's going to carry. So that is why the submarine is ultimately called the deterrent. If you see in the Royal Navy, they don't call it a SSBN. They call it the deterrent, because it is meant to be the ultimate deterrent for anyone to attempt a strike against a country. In fact, if you see the 45 years of the Cold War, it was the cat and mouse games played by the submarines on both sides, the SSBNs on both sides, that actually kept the Cold War cold. Even though there were lots of provocations at the Cuban Missile Crisis, etc., when the world actually came to the brink of a nuclear apocalypse. But it was the knowledge that an attack can come from anywhere that kept the Cold War cold. So I think from that perspective, the triad becomes very important for us, particularly the sea-based vector, because that is your only credible second strike capability. And that is very important. If you're not going to do a first strike, then your second strike capability has to be credible enough to not let the enemy decide that, oh, well, I can carry out a preemptive first strike without expecting a massive retaliation. And our nuclear doctrine also talks of a massive retaliatory capability. So we mean business, and the triad is what the C element of the triad indicates that, yes, we mean business and we have the capability to do this. And that is why it becomes important. Which brings me to another point. 2 SSBNs is better than 1, but it is not a fully credible second strike capability with the country as yet. To have a very credible, a fully credible second strike capability, one should be able to keep an SSBN on patrol 24/7, 365 days of the year. Because the moment you have SSBNs coming in and out of harbor, after all, they have to surface to enter harbor. The enemy knows who's in and who's out. And if there's only 1 or 2, they would have a pretty good idea of which one's coming in when. So obviously the second one's gone out. There may be a time when the refit cycles of both might overlap each other to a certain extent. And we may not be able to keep a single SSBN out at sea. Of course, having 2 is much, much better than having 1, because 1 out at sea still gives credibility. But ideally, to have a fully credible continuous at sea deterrence, the Brits call it that, CASD, continuous at sea deterrence, we need to have a force level of 4 SSBNs, which very generically translates into 1 is undergoing refit and maintenance, 1 is, coming out of a refit and going on patrol, another one is returning from patrol, 1 boat is on patrol. So if you look at it that way, 3 is a good number, 4 is an ideal number. And I think the Indian program at the moment is looking at 4 SSBNs. Yes. We have 2 now, 2. We saw some satellite pictures of a third one, which is at an advanced stage of construction, and we know a 4th one is coming. Also, the 3rd and 4th boat, from what we understand, are going to be substantially different from Arighaat and Arighaat. They're going to be much larger. They're going to be equipped to carry a much longer range missile. We are still talking of 750 kilometers and 3,500 kilometers. China's JL-3 is more than 10,000 kilometers range.
Yeah.
China can target Washington, D.C. from its own waters. And similarly with the Americans and the Russians, they're all operating missiles of 10,000 kilometer range or thereabouts. So we have to now reach that level of deterrence. It will take time, obviously. But the fact is that we are headed in the right direction. We are making incremental progress. But even now, our capability is, I wouldn't go to the extent of saying it's not credible, but certainly to make it fully credible, we need to go that extra mile and get a force level of 4 SSBNs. That would make it. And I think the way the progress is going, by the end of this decade, perhaps, we should be there.
Yeah. So the Chinese are operating around 6 Jin-class SSBNs at this point.
They have the 094, and now they're developing a new class of SSBN called the 096.
Yeah, so we have a lot of catching up to do. Obviously,
yes.
But this is a continuous program.
It's not a zero-sum game. It's not if he has so many, I have so many. It's what I can put against you. Now, the advantage a long-range missile has that you don't have to send your own submarine close to the enemy waters just because your missile doesn't have adequate range to target the specific targets you have.
So it's not about
what is called a bastion concept. You don't leave with the safety of your own waters, but you can still target, the enemy wherever you want to target it, whatever your chosen targets might be. So we have to reach that level of deterrence now.
Yeah, it's not about bean counting. It's essentially about the capability to reach where we want to reach and also to strike when and where we want to strike. So that's what you are talking about. So in fact, for the audience's benefit, India did a nuclear test in 1998, after which the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee announced that India is a nuclear armed state, though we are not yet recognized as a nuclear armed state as per the international arrangement as of now. But the point is, we are a nuclear armed state at this point in time. Nobody can deny this fact anymore. And also, we had brought out this nuclear doctrine publicly in 2003, when a cabinet note was approved by the cabinet headed by Vajpayee at that time, and it was put out as a press release by the government of India, where they talk about this credible nuclear deterrence in no first use and all these doctrines that they adopted. So this is for the benefit of the viewers. So this also takes me. You did refer to this a little bit. I think the submarine program, whether it is the SSBNs or the SSNs or the conventional, diesel electric powered submarine is essentially a continuous program, because these are the most important underwater capabilities that we are going to be having over the many decades to come. Maybe the warfare changes. I don't know what will happen in the future, but the point is, India currently has about 8 kilo class diesel electric conventional submarines that they are operating, apart from 4 HTW conventional submarines. There is one Nirpa class submarine that India has taken on lease, on a 10-year lease from Russia, which is currently operating as INS Chakra. And also now we have added one more to the INS Arighaat, which is INS Arighaat at this point in time. Apart from that, we have 6 Calvary class conventional submarines which are operating. And there is a multiple program for building 15 more of conventional submarines, 6 more of the SSBNs, which is the killer submarines that we are going to be building. And also, as Commodore Anil Jai Singh rightly pointed out, 2 more of the INS Arighaat class submarines. So it's a huge submarine building projects that we are doing. We have the 75 India, which is the conventional submarines, which will be the next advanced submarines, which will come with a AIP technology, which is the air independent propulsion technology, which enables the conventional submarines which have to emerge out of water or more frequently. Now with the AIP technology, they can be submerged for a longer period. This is a capability the nuclear submarines already have, in the sense that not the nuclear submarines essentially can stay underwater for a longer period than a conventional submarine, which is just for the benefit of our viewers. Sir, you were part of the 3rd-year submarine building plan when you were serving in the Navy and of course in the plans directorate. So where do we stand at this point in time? Because I remember it was about 24 submarines were to be built under the conventional submarines, were to be built under the 30-year plan. But also the nuclear project is essentially a very, it's apart from the 30-year plan, if I understand it correctly. So where do we stand both in the conventional submarine building plan and the nuclear SSBNs and SSNs construction plans, and where do you think we are going to be heading from here?
Okay, so I'll take one thing at a time. Let me first talk about the conventional submarine program, what we call SSKs, diesel electric submarines. These are submarines which are where diesel generators are used to charge the batteries, which in turn give power to the motors, electric motors, which propel the submarine. So the limitation they have is that every 2 or 3 days, the batteries need to be charged. And so obviously they don't come to surface anymore, because now we have a snorkel capability. And that snorkel, you take fresh air for the diesel generator, which charges the batteries, which then again are available to the motors for whatever duration the submarine wants to dive and operate. So obviously this is a limitation. We are in a technology regime where very advanced anti-submarine warfare technologies are now coming to the fore. So any submarine having to expose itself for whatever period of time is vulnerable to being picked up by anti-submarine warfare forces, particularly in shallow waters, the North Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal. And then an enemy country can bring a lot of pressure to bear its anti-submarine warfare platforms. They can create a very dense environment from which it becomes very difficult for a submarine to extricate itself. So India got its first submarine in 1967. That was the Foxtrot class, Calvary class submarines. Now, our submarine program was very sort of sporadic. Between 67 and 74, we got 8 submarines. Then nothing happened till 1986. Then between 1986 and 1992, we got some 10 submarines. We got 2 from Germany. We got 8 from Russia. Then we built 2 submarines in 1992 and 94. The 2 German submarines we built in India. And then again, that program was terminated for whatever reasons, political reasons, it was terminated. Then in 99-200, we bought 2 more kilo class submarines. So this was very sporadic. There were periods when you had a very potent submarine arm because everything was very new. And there were long gaps thereafter where you had platforms which were aging. So it was basically to address this that the Navy decided to make a 30-year plan for indigenous submarine construction. Now, the keyword is indigenous. It wasn't about buying submarines from abroad. It was also to develop the capability to build indigenous submarines, which over 30 years, we would perfect that ability And thereafter, we would have a production line, 2 production lines of submarines, each one making a submarine for the Navy every alternate year, while we are decommissioning the old ones, with the intention that by 2030, we would have a very potent force level of 18 to 20 conventional submarines, 20 modern conventional submarines with newer technologies. This was the plan. The plan envisaged 2 things. Firstly, it envisaged that India will establish 2 submarine production lines on which they will build a tranche of 6 submarines each in collaboration with a foreign partner, preferably different foreign partners. These 12 submarines will form the bedrock of our own indigenous capability to design, develop, and build submarines. We will learn from them, we will get technology from there, and we will then be able to complete from cradle to grave look after a submarine. We don't have to go back to a foreign country either for design or development or manufacture. So the plan was that these 12 submarines we would run 2 programs simultaneously, which has come to be known as Project 75 and Project 75 India, would run simultaneously. By 2012 or 2015, we would have had 12 submarines, 6 of one class, 6 of another class. And thereafter, we would have embarked on our indigenous program of 12 more submarines, and again in 2 tranches of 6 submarines each. So that by 2030, as you mentioned correctly, we would have built 24 submarines. In the meantime, the old submarines would have got decommissioned. So we would have a force level of 18 to 20 submarines, which we would thereafter maintain with these 2 production lines. That was the original 30-year plan. Now, implementation of the plan, like implementation of most expensive defense plans, does run into trouble. So the first contract for Project 75 was signed with the French in 2005, with the first boat to be delivered in 7 years. So although the program was running behind schedule by 5 to 6 years, it was expected by 2012 at least some amount of capability would be built up, because the older submarines were getting older by the day.
Yeah.
The Project 75I actually started in 2008, but for various reasons over a period of time, it just kept getting delayed. It would go to and forth between the ministry and the Navy. The AONs would expire. All kinds of things were happening. Finally, the RFP for that was issued only in 2021. The AON was given in 2018 or 2019. So we lost almost 12 to 14 years. Unfortunately, the Scorpion program, the P-75 program, where 6 submarines were being built by MDL, and where the first submarine should have got ready by 2012, 7 years from the date of signing of the contract, the first submarine actually got commissioned in December 2017. So actually it took 12 years from the time of signing the contract for the first submarine to get commissioned. And we had no other program on the anvil either. So that is where the 30-year program really took a beating. Subsequently, of course, 4 more submarines have been commissioned. So we have 5 Scorpions now. The 6th one is undergoing sea trials and should get commissioned maybe by the end of this year or sometime next year. So that program will end at 2025 latest, those 6 submarines. 75I is moving ahead. We are, it's being negotiated between the government. Reports are going to and fro, and it will probably happen. So, a guesstimate would say maybe a contract would be signed maybe 2 years from now, let's say, or 1.5 years, 2 years from now, which would take us to 25, 26. And 7 years thereafter for a boat to be built, for the first boat to be built, takes us to 2033, 34, which means that till the 2030s, we are not going to be able to add any more submarines to our arsenal. But by 2030, we would have 11 submarines of vintage between 30 and 45 years. Now, that's something in a Navy of India, a prestigious Navy like the Indian Navy of India's size, with the kind of maritime security challenges we are facing, can definitely not afford. But unfortunately, we are caught up in this cycle now. The only way of rectifying it to whatever extent is to speed up the existing programs, the 75I, and maybe move the indigenous program also ahead. 75I, unlike 75, involves a lot of very deep transfer of technology. We do not want to be in a position that when we start to build our own indigenous submarines, we have to go back to a foreign manufacturer for any support of any kind. It includes including intellectual property transfer of certain technologies, which is very important. And I think we must stick to that, because that is extremely important if we have to become an individual submarine, an indigenous submarine building power. So that's very important. And I think we will insist on that. And even the partners, the foreign partners who are supporting the program with Indian shipyards are conscious of this. They are cognizant of that. They've responded to the RFP positively. So I have no doubt in my mind that, of course, there will be a lot of to and froing and negotiations and all, but whatever the Indian government wants or the Indian Navy wants will be available. The only question is, how fast will it happen? We can't afford to let our program slip any further. Now, what happened in the meantime, India, with the kind of security situation that was coming up around, India, okay, now let me also come back to the conventional submarine program once more. We are one of the very few modern navies in the world which still does not have an AIP-equipped submarine because we have not contracted for one. The French, we should have insisted with the French that we want AIP-equipped submarines, but we didn't. So today we have 6 Calvary-class submarines, none of which have an AIP, on which we are going to fit the indigenous AIP which is being developed. Now, we've gone a long way in that. We have a lab model which is being tested. We've got a production agency which is going into production. But transferring a lab model into a working model on a submarine and working at full efficiency is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. So I don't see a operational AIP system happening for another 4 to 5 years at least. So we'll be nearer 2030, 28, 29, 30 by the time we can say that we have an AIP-equipped submarine. All our neighbors have AIP-equipped submarines. Every modern navy has AIP-equipped submarines except the Indian Navy. This is a serious operational limitation because we are going to operate in shallow waters. We are going to operate close to enemy coasts in the Bay of Bengal and the North Arabian Sea. We cannot afford to make our submarines vulnerable to being exposed to the surface and be picked up by ASW forces. So where on one hand you can in an AIP system stay died for 10 to 14 days, here you have to come up every 2-3 days and you expose yourself every 2-3 days. Now this is a serious operational lacuna which we have to address.
I think so Pakistan has 3 French Agosta 90B submarines, which they got in the late 90s and early 2000s. All the 3 have an AIP system. It's a French MESMA system. And Pakistan is getting 8 AIP-equipped Type 039 submarines from China. Now, country of Pakistan size operating 11 submarines, you really wonder what do they want to do with them. So obviously, as I see it, it's something China is going to use. When China uses Pakistan as the proxy against India, it is going to be used, these submarines are going to be used to put pressure on us. Absolutely. It is not about Pakistan trying to win a war against us by deploying 8 submarines. And so obviously there's a larger strategic game plan in the Indian Ocean, which is being played out. And recently there was a gallantry award ceremony in Pakistan where naval aviator or maybe a NAFO's aviator was awarded for locking on to INS Calvary in the.
Now there's a lot of question marks on that claim because the ranges at which he claimed he detected the submarine periscope and all. Firstly, those kind of ranges you don't get at sea. So it's and not with the kind of equipment Pakistan is operating on its LRMP aircraft. So that in itself is very, very doubtful. Secondly, all he's seen is a periscope. And how he's homed on to the fact that this is Calvary's periscope is another $1 million question. It could be any submarine operating over there. So obviously there are doubts about the veracity of that claim, but nonetheless, for them it's a morale boosting thing. They picked up a Calvary, they're trying to put pressure on us, given him a gallantry award, etc. That's fine. Right. Then coming to the this is as far as the SSK program goes. Then I'll come to the SSN program. India needs SSNs as of yesterday. Let me be very honest. If we are going to be a carrier operating blue water navy, SSN is an absolutely integral part of that construct. We cannot have a navy without SSNs because SSNs today form the cutting edge of naval offensive capability for any navy in an ocean environment. And India intends to operate in the oceans and not in little seas around it. It's looking to be a big naval power. China is building an SSN capability, formidable SSN capability. They expect to have 15 SSNs by 2030. That is the sort of work they're doing. If they have 15 SSNs, then you can be rest assured that 2 or 3 of the SSNs are going to be permanently deployed in the Indian Ocean, along with probably a Chinese carrier battle group. Now, if we don't have a capability, similar capability to put pressure on their carrier battle group, they will be able to put pressure on the freedom of our options in the Indian Ocean by just telling you that, yeah, I have 2 or 3 SSNs around. That in itself is a major factor. So India has to, like I said, develop its SSN capability as of yesterday. The CCS is looking at it very seriously. The 30-year plan has been modified now. It talks about, instead of talking about 12 indigenous SSKs, it talks about 6 indigenous SSKs and 6 indigenous SSNs. But SSNs cost an arm and a leg. So to get approval for 6 is not going to be easy. But we can go at stages. We can do 2 + 2 + 2, or we can do 3 + 3. But the fact is, we must not delay the SSN program any further. SSBNs, as you know, we already got 2 and 2 are under construction. So that program is okay. It's a strategic program. Those are not war-fighting platforms. They have a much larger strategic role to play. So ideally, if you ask me, the Indian Navy requires, ideally, as a submariner, I would like to make that guesstimate is 4 SSBNs, ideally 6 SSNs, maybe 4 initially and 2 later, and 15 to 18 SSKs to be considered a credible blue water undersea warfare capable submarine navy, to put it that way.
Right, sir. So quite exhaustive plans there. Right, sir. So let's just move on to the submarine building capabilities of India, both in the government sector and the private sector. Of course, there are both conventional submarine building capabilities and the nuclear powered submarine capabilities that we have. The SSNs and SSBNs are essentially a government run program, essentially, and they are the ones who are building it at the submarine building center in Visakhapatnam. So, there is also a foreign element in it, in the sense that we are borrowing some technologies from Russia. For example, INS Arighaat, we did depend on Russia for the nuclear reactor, 83 megawatt nuclear reactor that is there in the INS Arighaat. So, what is the amount of foreign dependency that we still have as far as the nuclear powered and nuclear armed submarines are concerned, and also the conventional submarines are concerned, both Indian capability and the foreign help that are required?
Okay, so looking at the nuclear submarine program first, yes, I agree with you that we have taken certain amount of support probably from Russia for the Arighaat in terms of the reactor. But the fact is that reactors are very specialized sort of equipment. Miniaturizing a normal reactor into a submarine reactor is something that is a very advanced stage of technology. And probably we have taken support of the Russians to learn this and go ahead with our own capability. But otherwise, if you see Arighaat, the complete hull has been fabricated in India. It's been done by the private sector and public sector combination and the government. Most of the equipment on board, whether it's the communication suite, the navigation suite, the fire control system, the weapon tubes, all the critical equipment, lots of auxiliary machinery is all Indian, built by Indian industry, both private and public. And it has been I think it's been a very good program in terms of bringing Indian industry on board. The private industry has played a major role in the SSBN program, in both small and large. There are small SMEs who have done tremendous amount of work. There are big industries, who have also done a tremendous amount of work. So I think the SSBN program is on the right track. With every boat, I'm sure we are substantially increasing the indigenous content as we are learning. Because things like a nuclear submarine, the quality of the valves has to be different. You probably need titanium valves instead of just regular valves or things like that. But all this is now happening in India. So I think there may be certain very critical areas where we still have to look for help from somebody. But by and large, I think we should be able to lick this by the time the 4 SSBNs are complete, we should be pretty comfortable with building our own nuclear submarines. And that is why I think the SSN program becomes very important, because all these technologies will be tested out in the SSN program, where everything will have to be slightly different from the SSBN program. Those boats will be substantially different in what they do, nuclear power being the only common factor. So it will be a great fill-up to Indian industry once this program comes online. Because when you create an ecosystem of large and small industry, they need continuous orders. Now, a small guy is not going to make a huge investment if he's told, I just need 2 of something or 3 of something. It's not worth it for him. So he has to be told, well, submarines are not going to be built every day, but I can assure you that if you deliver something good to me now, I assure you the next order will also be yours. Or the order after that will be yours, if I'm satisfied with your product. In our case, half the time we say, oh, well, okay, you give us what you got. When it's time for the next one, we'll take a look again. We'll again have a competitive bidding process. That's very discouraging for industry. So I think now, with the thrust on defense exports, with the thrust on defense industry, with Make in India, indigenization, positive indigenization lists, perhaps this policy lacuna will get addressed to a certain extent. And MSMEs particularly, which are the fountainhead of technology, will get the sort of support they've been asking for many years. In terms of the conventional program, we have, so far only one shipyard has built conventional submarines. That's Mazagon Docks Limited. They built 2 submarines with German support in 92 and 94. And then they built the 6 Type 75 French Scorpion submarines. One oft not, one fact which is not really publicly in the public domain or not really paid attention to is that while they built only 2 German submarines, and the German submarine program stopped after that because of political reasons, that program was terminated. Germany, despite that, was able to transfer enough maintenance transfer of technology to India that in the 40 years, almost 40 years since Shishumar first came in 1986, no German submarine has ever had to go back to Germany for either a refit or a repair or a modernization or even life extension certification. Everything has happened in India. If at all the German company has done anything, it's provided the basic oversight saying that, okay, you're doing it okay. But not a single German submarine has ever gone back to Germany. Everything
That's a substantial capability. That's
which is substantially different from the Russian submarines. The kilos have gone back regularly to Russia for modernization. So this is something that's not very well known. But it is about... So Germany, let me just take a minute. A company like TKMS, which is now bidding also for the 75I program, it's not new to them. They are the world's largest submarine builder. They're exporting submarines to 25 countries. And they have different cooperation models with every country. Somewhere they're building submarines for somebody, somewhere they're building in their own country and offering maintenance TOT. For example, Israel. Israel says, I don't want to build submarines, but I should be able to repair my submarine. So that's the sort of TOT that's been transferred to Israel. South Korea, they transferred the design, they transferred everything. South Korea is a major submarine builder now in Asia. Turkey, building its own submarines of German design. So TKMS has adopted different models for different countries. And that is why it has been able to ensure that a German submarine has never had to go back to Germany, because when it came to India, they provided the kind of technology India wanted to be able to do that. So that is important. So as I said, at the moment, we have gone back to foreign collaborators because the 30-year plan said that, basically to understand the finer points of submarine design and to progressively increase the indigenization in our submarines. Unfortunately, the Scorpion program has not delivered on indigenization it promised, with the result that we are still quite dependent on a foreign OEM for certain areas of design and even development. But once 75I happens, the parameters in that are very clearly defined as to what exactly the level of indigenization that's required, and it's going to be monitored very closely, and I'm sure the government will ensure that nobody falls short. So I think this is the last program in India that is going to have foreign collaboration of any kind.
Right.
And
so
thereafter, we are going to go
collaborating with the foreigners,
totally indigenous thereafter.
With the foreigners to learn the modern latest technology since the last time we built the HDW submarine. So that's the idea behind this collaboration. Right, sir. So, thank you so much for spending time. I just want to mention that since you mentioned about the industry participation, the press note that was issued by the MOD on the INS Arighaat talks about special materials and also complex engineering and also indigenous systems and equipment made within India. So the considerable capability for submarine building, particularly a nuclear-armed, nuclear-powered submarine building, has been built locally, domestically by India, both in its government and private sector industry. So that's
it's been a very commendable effort, no doubt about it.
So hats off to the efforts that have been put, despite all the 30-year plan setbacks that have happened. But yet, I think India is progressing. Atmanirbharta, which is self-reliance in English, is sort of not a pipe dream anymore. I think it's going to be happening very soon. With that, I want to remind my audience that Commodore Anil Jai Singh is a veteran Indian Navy submariner. He's an anti-submarine warfare specialist. And it is a no mean feat that somebody has commanded 4 submarines, in the Indian Navy, and also a fleet ship in the Indian Navy, 5 commands, which is considerable for any officer to have done it. So hats off to him for the kind of knowledge that he possesses and shares with us. I want to thank him on behalf of Defense Capital and also on behalf of all our viewers for his time and for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, as always. Thanks a lot.
So, thanks very much, sir. Before we end, I request all of viewers to go to the bell icon and click it and follow our channel for more updates on various aspects of India's defense and aerospace sector in the days to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Next.